Okay, YouTube, the Colonel's back, and I'm here for the two-parter to my response to a user who goes by the name Johnman1911. I've already read his deleted comments. Now I'm going to respond to them in a more detailed manner. Okay, Johnman, when I said I like how Save the Men's video is titled "Nothing is Sacred to the Modern Women," yet you have a guy on here comparing childbirth to taking a dump. That comment didn't apply that I agreed with the general that childbirth is a miracle or is sacred per se. I was merely pointing out the cosmic irony of Save the Men's stance that the orgasmic childbirth is somehow disgusting, is somehow making a mockery out of something as important as giving birth to a human being. And yet there's a man on here who, and I presumed that you agree with Save the Men's video. If I'm wrong, my apologies. But then on this video you have a guy comparing childbirth to taking a dump. I really didn't think much of that comment. I just found it ironic that that scenario was going on. So I don't think childbirth is a miracle or sacred or special or anything that needs to be worshipped. And in another thing, in the second part of my comment, when I said when I talked about people getting wrapped up in ideology, that they lose their sense of empathy, again I was still referring to empathy, not worship and special treatment. You see, even though I'm not a man, and even though I have no children of my own, and even though I'm a very young person, I can still sympathize with men who are victims of paternity. I can empathize with men who are victims of paternity fraud. I can empathize with men who were trapped by a woman having an anchor baby, or women who get unfairly their resources unfairly snatched away from them in divorce court, or men who are victims of domestic violence but it's never reported, or the cops always take the woman's side. Even though I'm not a man, I could empathize with that. That's wrong, and those are travesties of justice. This does not mean that I worship men or that I worship men in that situation. This is an example of me empathizing with that element. And what I was referring to was Save the Men's lack of empathy for the pain that women have to go through when they give birth. Because Save the Men and those who agree with him was essentially demonizing pregnant women who chose this way to give birth, the orgasmic childbirth process. He was trying to make it seem as though the women were being narcissistic, or they were doing something wrong, they were doing something unethical or dirty by choosing this. And this shows a lack of empathy on his part. You do not have to worship. Nobody is asking to be worshipped. Okay? And your other posts about sometimes all pregnancies aren't noble, all women aren't beautiful. Again, where did any of my comments imply such? All I ever said was that that this concept doesn't need to be demonized or be seen as anything dirty or offensive, especially when you consider that sex and having orgasms had to be done to create the baby, and when you take into account that that, as the general was saying, as a woman is breastfeeding, she may experience some sexual stimulation. That's going to be inevitable because areas like the genitals and nipples are erogenous zones. So if they're touched a certain way, then the human being will be stimulated. That was mainly the main. And you're correct that things like childbirth isn't beautiful, it's not a miracle. You're right, that is all subjective. However, that wasn't the main thrust of the general's argument or why he made that video. And your other post that I didn't read, where you were responding to the general, saying that maybe men would view pregnancy different if women would respect their bodies and they wouldn't reproduce irresponsibly. Again, the women in Save the Men's video, these were married women. And these were women who were married to men who supported this this concept of orgasmic childbirth. The men supported, the fathers of the children supported it, because as the general was saying, they did not want their wives, the loves of their life, the women who are going to bring their seeds into the world. They didn't want them to experience agony. Again, this is an example of empathizing with somebody's pain or somebody's plight. This is not worship. Nobody is asking for worship or special treatment. But again, seeing childbirth as a miracle or beauty, again, yes, you're right, that is subjective. And my comments never implied that it was beautiful or a miracle or sacred. I just found it funny how you have one MRA dude talking about women don't respect anything and they don't see anything as sacred, and then there's a man on here comparing childbirth to taking a dump. In my opinion, that comparison shouldn't be made, not because I think it's insulting to women, but it's just an apples and orange comparison, and it's kind of insulting to people in general, in my opinion. But again, that was not the main source of my argument. And I want to clarify that I do agree with you that women shouldn't reproduce irresponsibly. They shouldn't have anchor babies, as I refer to it as anchor babies, when you just want to have a baby just to keep a man, or they shouldn't reproduce with the wrong men. But again, this is all irrelevant and doesn't refute anything that's being said. So yeah, I do want to use up some more time just because I have it, but I don't think there's nothing more to be said. I just want to close out with, yes, I agreed with what you said in your comments, and all I'm saying is that it didn't refute any of my stances, or even any of the general stances, because even though he was getting a bit heated and explaining his view of childbirth, it was more than about childbirth is always beautiful. That wasn't the main argument. And I've interacted with General Backlash long enough to know that that wasn't the main thing of his argument, and to also know that he too agrees with your comments. But he ultimately removed them because they were straw manning and they were irrelevant to the topic. And yeah, I think that's it. Well, I hope you're satisfied with this. Again, this wasn't meant to. It's nothing personal, and I didn't take your comments personally. All I was saying is that you that again you weren't disproving my arguments. You were just posting irrelevant stuff. And that's it. Okay, Girdle of Wisdom out.